Prime Minister Mark Carney has ordered a full review of Canada's multi-billion-dollar F-35 jet deal, questioning whether the nation traded sovereignty for dependency.
Prime Minister challenges the F-35 fighter jet program, demanding a $27 billion review that could redefine Canada's defense future.
For 15 years, Ottawa had one mission: replace the aging CF-18 Hornets. Keep it simple, keep it American, keep it predictable. The expectation was carved in stone. Lockheed Martin's F-35 Lightning II would dominate Canadian skies, integrate seamlessly into NATO command structures, and silence every debate about Arctic sovereignty. Washington applied relentless pressure. Allied defense ministries nodded in agreement. The decision felt inevitable. Hey folks, so what went down in spring 2025 totally threw that certainty out the window. Mark Carney, only about 3 weeks into being Prime Minister, dropped a bombshell that got everyone talking in Ottawa's defense committees and had people at the Pentagon doing double takes. He called for a full review of the F-35 purchase. Not minor adjustments, not schedule modifications. A complete, honest examination of whether Canada had committed a strategic error worth $27.7 billion. Yes, you heard that precisely. The program cost had nearly doubled since the original $19 billion estimate, but here's where the narrative becomes absolutely fascinating. The aircraft Canada had dismissed as inferior, the fighter jet defense analysts claimed couldn't compete, was already accomplishing something extraordinary across the Atlantic. Sweden's Gripen E was flying NATO combat exercises. And what happened next left defense establishments speechless. If you've watched Canada struggle with this procurement disaster for over a decade, you understand how rare this moment truly is. A prime minister actually willing to question the predetermined choice. Hit like if you think Canada should be calling its own shots on national defense, not just following whatever Washington's already decided. To understand why Carney suddenly questioned the whole thing, we need to go back to March 2022. At that time, Canada's Department of National Defense announced its final decision, the F-35, after years of evaluating Sweden's Gripen, France's Rafale, and the Eurofighter Typhoon. Predictably, America won. The narrative was straightforward. The F-35 was the most advanced, the most expensive, the most integrated with NATO systems, the most aligned with American strategic interests. At least that's what officials publicly stated. But something was happening behind closed doors. Competing nations were systematically withdrawing from consideration. In 2018, France's Dassault withdrew, citing legitimate concerns about American control through Five Eyes intelligence sharing. In 2019, Airbus pulled out, claiming the competition was structurally biased toward Lockheed Martin. Even Boeing's Super Hornet was mysteriously disqualified in 2021. When Canada made its choice, only one option remained standing. Picture this reality in your mind. This had been Canada's trajectory for decades. Remember when Pierre Trudeau confronted Washington over the National Energy Program in the 1970s? Remember Canada negotiating NAFTA as an equal partner? By 2022, those moments seemed like ancient history. The defense establishment had become so thoroughly integrated with American command structures that questioning the F-35 felt like questioning NATO itself. It was psychological capture. Think about that dynamic for a moment. You're a defense minister in Ottawa. You're surrounded by officers trained at American military academies, briefed by American liaison personnel, thinking within American strategic frameworks. The political pressure from Washington is constant but subtle. American ambassadors send warnings about NATO compatibility. Strategic analysts write opinion pieces about alliance unity. American defense contractors lobby quietly but extraordinarily effectively. By January 2023, Canada officially ordered the first 16 F-35s. The die was cast. Then March 2025 arrived. Carney assumed office, and suddenly the conversation shifted fundamentally. Not because of the Gripen's performance, that revelation would come later, but because of something more essential. Trump's trade war had exposed Canada's strategic vulnerability. Here was America threatening 25% tariffs on Canadian steel, 50% on aluminum, threatening annexation through economic coercion. And Canada's entire military strategy was built on trusting that same country. The cruel irony was unmistakable. Canada had placed all its defense eggs in the American basket, and that basket was becoming increasingly unstable. The numbers tell an extraordinary story. In March 2022, Canada was promised the F-35 program would cost $19 billion. By September 2025, the U.S. Government Accountability Office revealed that cost had exploded to $27.7 billion. That's not inflation. That's not supply chain adjustment. That's systemic failure embedded in America's most expensive weapons program. The Block 4 upgrade, the version Canada actually ordered, is now 5 years behind schedule and $6 billion over budget. Let that sink in completely. While American defense planners keep promising capability, Canadian taxpayers keep writing larger checks with zero guarantee of delivery. But the real problem isn't just the money, it's the control. Here's what Washington doesn't advertise publicly. Every software update on an F-35 flows through the U.S. Department of Defense. Every maintenance procedure requires American authorization. Even testing Canadian jets outside continental United States bases requires Pentagon permission. That's not an alliance between equals, that's a client relationship. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic Ocean, something was happening that would change everything. In June 2025, Sweden signed a new defense cooperation agreement with Canada, not as a junior partner seeking American approval, but as an equal seeking to strengthen bilateral ties. Sweden wasn't asking Canada to join an American system. Sweden was offering to build Gripen fighters in Canada, transfer intellectual property, and give Canada complete control over its own aircraft. Then came the NATO exercises in summer 2025. This is where silence turned into shock. The Gripen flew alongside the most advanced jets in the world. The Eurofighter Typhoon, the French Rafale, America's own F-35. What happened in electronic warfare simulations surprised everyone. The Swedish fighter didn't just perform adequately, it stunned NATO observers. It manipulated enemy radar, it confused missile guidance systems, it fed false signals to targeting sensors. One NATO officer compared it to fighting an invisible opponent. Think about that comparison for a moment. The aircraft Canada had rejected as second-rate was outperforming some of the most advanced machines on Earth. And it was doing it cheaper, way cheaper. The Gripen, refuel it, rearm it, back in the air and Yum. And dear 10 minutes. Small crew, basic runway. That's it. The F-35, massive infrastructure, complicated logistics, constant American oversight, every single time. For a nation stretched across frozen tundra and Arctic territory, the contrast was obvious. The Gripen was designed for independence. The F-35 was designed for integration into American command structures. When news of the Gripen's performance reached Ottawa, it caused genuine institutional discomfort. Defense experts who had championed the F-35 started quietly revising their positions. Television panels featured analysts admitting what few had dared say publicly. Strategically speaking, the Gripen made far more sense for Canada, cheaper to operate, better suited to harsh climates, no need for massive air bases, no American kill switch on critical systems. Inside closed-door meetings in Canada's Parliament, senior officers began admitting something they'd never wanted to say out loud. Canada hadn't just made a procurement decision in 2022, Canada had made a sovereignty decision, and it had chosen dependency over independence. If you're proud of Canada's spirit of self-reliance, if you believe we should control our own destiny, hit like on this video, because that's exactly what the Gripen represents and exactly what the F-35 takes away. Here's what this moment really means for Canada. For 80 years, Canada's military has defined itself by a single principle: stay as close as possible to the American military. That's not inherently wrong. Geographically, it made sense. But geopolitical reality has shifted dramatically. America is withdrawing from the role of stable global guardian. America is becoming unpredictable. America is treating allies like subordinates. Carney understood something that Canadian defense planners have forgotten. Independence cannot be purchased. It has to be protected, nurtured, and believed in. Sweden proved that principle. A small Scandinavian nation with a fraction of America's defense budget created a fighter jet that challenges superpowers on their own terms. Not because Sweden is militarily superior, but because Sweden refused to build its entire defense posture around dependency on one ally. Saab designed the Gripen to give smaller nations autonomy, to prove that sovereignty could exist even without a superpower's backing. That's the real competition here, not between two aircraft, between two philosophies. One says, trust the American system, follow the American framework, integrate into American command structures. The other says, build capability you control, maintain independence, strengthen partnerships that treat you as an equal. For decades, Canada chose the first path. We got comfortable as America's junior partner. We built our entire military culture around American interoperability. We stopped asking hard questions about sovereignty because it felt easier not to. The Gripen debate isn't really about fighter jets, it's about whether Canada still believes in its own independence. It's about whether we choose the aircraft that hands Washington the controls to our systems, or the aircraft that lets Canada control its own destiny. August 2025, Canada and Sweden signed a new aerospace and defense cooperation framework. Not a standard trade agreement, not a symbolic gesture, a partnership. The message was clear. Canada was beginning to look beyond American dependency. Saab offered to build Gripen fighters right here in Canada. That means aerospace jobs in Montreal. That means engineering expertise staying in Canada. That means Canadian sovereignty, not American permission. This is what it means to be Canadian in 2025, not following Washington's predetermined script. Not accepting the obvious choice because a superpower pushes it. Not building your entire defense strategy around trusting an increasingly unpredictable ally. Canada still has time. The first 16 F-35s aren't delivered yet. The remaining 72 aircraft could still be replaced. The decision Carney ordered for this fall could still reshape Canadian defense for generations. If you believe Canada should control its own military future, if you think independence matters more than integration, subscribe to this channel. Because we're watching a moment where Carney's government is choosing between two different visions of what it means to be Canadian. One path leads to deeper American dependency, the other path leads to true sovereignty, and unlike the past 15 years, this time we might actually get it right. So what do you think? Should Canada go with the Gripen and take back our independence, or stick with the F-35 and accept American control? Tell us in the comments.